Hi, Sandra. How you doing?
Hi.
Hi.
Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you too. I'm Enrico. How you doing? Very nice to meet you. First of all, thank you very much for volunteering for this interview.
My
I
pleasure.
really appreciate this. Before we get started, I have something that's called an official consent form, and all it's really saying here is that I'm a student at Mohawk College, and it's giving me permission to interview you. It's not giving it's This doesn't require me to give. I'm not entitled to give you any kind of medical advice. I'm not that kind of a professional, you know. So at any time we can stop the. If you feel uncomfortable at any time, we can stop the video.
Okay.
Okay. So if you can just sign here.
Yeah, thank you. Great. There you go.
Thank you very much. Excellent. Thank you so much. So, um, uh, so from my understanding, from you grew up in a military family.
Yes, my father was 16 when he joined the Canadian Forces.
Mm-hmm.
When he originally joined, he joined infantry and moved from the infantry, which can be very taxing on a body, even a young body, to the paratroopers, which, in my opinion, not much of a big change. You know, foot soldier to jumping out of planes, and eventually he moved into the 4th Field Ambulance Division, where he was in the field as a medic in the field ambulances. Sorry, and eventually, in the last few years of his military career, he was teaching at CFB Borden in the military medic school.
That's phenomenal. How old were you when he was during his military career?
I was born into it. My dad had been in for quite a few years by the time I was born. I have 4 siblings that are older than me, so he was in probably 18, 19 years by the time I was born. He was stationed in Sydney, Nova Scotia on Cape Breton Island when I was born, and we were there for a few years, and that's when my journey as a military brat, as we like to deem ourselves, began.
Where are some of the places you've been to?
Myself, I was one of the luckier ones of my siblings. I didn't have to move around quite as often. When I was 4 years old, we moved from Sydney to CFB Borden here in Ontario, just south of Barrie. When I was going into grade 3, so about 9 years old, we were actually posted to Germany, West Germany, and lived in Lahr, West Germany for 4 years. And then after that, we were posted back to Borden, which for me was great because I was familiar with the area. I mean, the moving every few years was a trial in itself, but being posted back to Borden was great because I knew what it was about and it was familiar. And we actually stayed in. My dad was continuously posted to Borden until he retired, and then we moved from there into Barrie when my father officially retired from the military.
Oh wow!
But he's been essentially coast to coast: Edmonton, Chilliwack, Comox, PEI, Petawawa, like all over London, Ontario. Yeah.
It sounds like he's been to a lot of places and a lot of experiences.
Definitely, yeah. And those were just his postings here within Canada. He also did peacekeeping missions, in Ethiopia and Kosovo, as well as a 6-month stint in Alert in northern Canada, where he was the chief medic on site for 6 months. And yeah, he's been everywhere. He's been Jamaica, Fiji, when he served on the ships and as the medic. And yeah, he definitely saw the world. And by him being in the military, us as his children, we got to experience things that an average family wouldn't get to do.
What was the impact of him being away from home so much?
That was definitely a challenge. As I said, there was 5 children in my family. It's kind of like 2 separate families when you look at it. My 3 oldest siblings were 17, 15, and 14 when I was born. And then my next sibling up from me, the 4th one, was 7. So it was kind of like 2 separate families. When we were all together, it was a little bit easier, right? Because my mom had lots of help with the younger children. But as we got older and it was down to just the 2 of us, the 2 youngest at home, it was a challenge because my dad would be gone for 6 months,
Mm-hmm.
and we didn't have the technology then like we do today. Like today, you can pick up your phone and you can see the other person on the other end, right?
Mm-hmm.
You still have that. I wouldn't say physical connection, but it is a type of physical connection because you can see them.
Mm-hmm.
Um, it was challenging. We gave my mom a run for her money for sure. Um, we'd get to talk to dad. Like if he was gone 6 months, we might get to talk to him twice a month because when he could call, it was usually later at night, and
Mm-hmm.
that was his time with my mom
Mm-hmm.
because it was hard for her too with him being away. He always made up for it.
Mm-hmm.
You know, he always came home with something special for each of us, and but we also knew that if we messed up too bad while dad was away, mom was writing it down and we were going to wear it when he got home. Like he was the boss for sure.
So with 5 children at home, your mom really this had a big impact on your mom. It sounds like.
Definitely, yeah. And when my next brother up from me and I were younger, she also had to work. So raising the two of us, my older siblings at that point had all moved out, started with their own lives.
Mm-hmm.
And so yeah, trying to raise the two of us, my father being away and working her job and running a household, it was a challenge, but you pull together. It's
Mm-hmm.
what you do, right? Like your dad is serving your country, and we're at home. We have to make sacrifices because he's doing what's needed for the rest of our nation.
Mm-hmm. It definitely sounds like that. So you were born into the military family.
Yes.
You've done a lot of traveling.
Oh my
extensively
goodness,
through
yeah.
that time. And your mom being the primary caregiver
Mhm.
for all 5 kids, and your dad being away. Like, what was the dynamic between you and your siblings during this time?
When I was younger, like I said, there was such a huge age gap between myself and the 3 oldest ones. Pardon me, sorry. My next brother up from me, being 7 years older, we had that typical sibling rivalry. But with my older siblings, when I was little, I didn't really know them because they left home when I was between the ages of basically 4 and 7. The 3 older ones were already gone from home. So there wasn't really a relationship at that point in our lives. There is now. I have a strong relationship, I would say, with definitely both of my sisters. And with my brother who's next up from me when we were younger. I mean, of course, sibling rivalries and brother-sister controversy, we'll call it. We were always there for each other. Like, if one of us had an issue, as much as we may be like, I don't like you, whatever, we would be there for each other and support each other through those times.
Mm-hmm. So what's the dynamic is still the same way today as it was back then growing up?
I would say it's actually increased. As we all get older, we get closer. Unfortunately, we lost my dad a few years ago, so that has drawn us together.
Okay.
But yeah, it's odd because there is such an age gap between me and my 3 oldest siblings,
Yes.
but you wouldn't know it when you see us together. So, and I think that's really important.
So with traveling with the whole family during this time, you must have seen some memorable sightings during your travels. I mean, what's some of the best experiences you've had while traveling with the whole family?
So the one that comes to mind first for me is when we were posted in West Germany. My great uncle, who I always looked on as my grandfather because unfortunately I never had the opportunity of knowing my grandfather all that well. My Dodie, as we called him, passed away when I was 3. So I have some recollection of him, but not too much. But my great uncle served with the North Nova Scotia Highlanders and landed on Juno Beach on D-Day and was captured in the airfield at Caen.
Oh.
So when we were, as I said, in West Germany, one summer we did the World War II war route of the North Nova Scotia Highlanders and had the pleasure of meeting the most wonderful local Frenchman in a little village. He actually chased down our car because when we're over there we have diplomatic license plates and they say Canada on them, and Canadians are very highly revered in Germany and France and Italy and all around those areas, Holland. And he chased us down, and he asked if he could be our tour guide for the day and show us things that we probably wouldn't see on our own. So my dad explained to him that we were looking for a place called Abbey d'Ardennes, which is where my great uncle was held prisoner by General Rommel.
General Rommel?
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 Yes. Rommel.
Okay.
And he took us there. He knew exactly what we were talking about. He had grown up with the grandchildren of the people who were in residence at the Abbey during the war. And I mean, at the time, I was 10 years old. I knew where I was going, but it didn't really, you're 10, right? It's like, okay, well, where's something more interesting?
Mm-hmm.
I can look back on that now, and I share that memory with my son, who's going to be 13 soon.
Mm-hmm.
And it's still so poignant in my mind that I stood in a place where my uncle was held prisoner. There's a positive outlook, of course, to the end of that. He did escape. As I said, I grew up with him and
Mm-hmm.
looked on him as my grandfather. But
Mm-hmm.
yes, he did escape. But he never talked about it because he saw some awful things, of course, as many veterans did.
Of course.
And as sad as that is, it's also a positive because it just reinforces so much why we have the Canadian military. And it makes me so proud that my uncle served and my father served, and subsequently my brother and both my sister's husbands also served. So
It sounds like you've gone through, so far what I'm getting so far is, it sounds like you've gone through more than what the average child has had the pleasure of growing up with. All these experiences and hearing these stories is just phenomenal. How old is your son?
my son is 13.
And what's the appreciation he has when hearing these stories from, being brought down to his generation?
It's actually funny that you ask. Probably 3-4 years ago, I had a discussion with him about how I'd like to take him to France and to Juno Beach someday. And he's always been fully exposed to the importance of not just Remembrance Day, but of every day appreciating our veterans who fight for our country.
Mm-hmm.
But on Remembrance Day, making sure you take that extra step to have your solemn moment and to say your thankful prayers and be extra respectful on that day.
Mm-hmm.
He has a very high regard for the military because of his pops. And he bugs me yearly, a few times a year. When are you taking me to France? When are you taking me to France? I want to go to France. I want to go to Juno Beach. I want to see where your uncle was held, and I want to see the places that pops took you. And so he has a very high regard and high appreciation for our forces as well.
It just sounds fascinating. When you were your son's age,
Yes.
where were you?
When I was 13, we actually got posted back to Borden.
Okay.
Yep.
And
So,
you, even when you, it sounds like all the places you've been to, you've made friends along the way.
I have friends all over the world. Yeah, it's Facebook is is an amazing thing. I have reconnected with people that I was in kindergarten with, and it's crazy. Like in Barrie, especially because it is so close to CFB Borden, which is where we were posted so frequently. I can be walking in the mall with my mom or with other family members, and like I'll hear my name and be like, I don't know anybody. Like, I don't live here anymore. Like, who is that? And I'll turn around and it'd be somebody that I went to school with. And it's like you just saw them the day before. Like, because we all grow up in the same experience, having to move every 3 years, having to say goodbye to friends, it's difficult. It's good, but it's difficult. So those friendships that you make, they're life lasting. Like my best friend, her father and mother were also in the military, and we met when I was 14, and we are still friends to this day. And I don't even look at her as my best friend anymore. She's my sister, and it's just those bonds are so strong because you've gone through, I mean, to use a military term, you've gone through the trenches together, right? It's what that other person has experienced, so you're sympathetic towards those things and you can relate.
Absolutely. What was high school like for you?
High school, when we lived on the military base, was great. I absolutely loved it. In my high school, grades 9 to 12, of course, OAC at the time, there were 238 of us. So everybody knew everybody.
Okay.
It was a public high school
Mm-hmm.
within the military base itself, taught by public teachers, like private citizen teachers, not by military. We didn't have to wear uniforms, anything like that. People always ask that question. It was just like you would have gone to high school. You just your regular clothes and just a much smaller, close-knit community. I went to high school at BBCI, which is Base Board and Collegiate Institute, from grade 9 to 11. And that's when my dad retired. And actually, the high school on the base closed down at the same time. And then I went to, as we term it, we're military brats, Civvy Street High School. It was one of the first overly overwhelming, if that's even a way of putting it, experiences of my life. I went from a high school, like I said, of just over 200 students to a high school of 2,500 students, where you weren't a name, you were just a face in the crowd. And that was a really hard adjustment for me.
Do you think it was a good adjustment or a bad adjustment, or was it indifferent?
At the time, I was very indifferent to it. Now, later in life, I can say that it was character building for sure. It taught me that you need to put yourself into those uncomfortable situations, and you need to learn how to adapt to them and rise above them. You need to know what's your limitation. How far can you go in your comfort zone? And yeah, so in retrospect, it was a good thing. At the time, no, I wouldn't have told you that.
Did you find it difficult when you're transitioning to keep up with some of the fads, as they say?
Yeah, because we didn't really worry about that, right? Like the military base we lived on was very close to a few local towns, and but it was like a town inside a town. Like we had our own stores, we had our own restaurants, we had swimming pools, indoor and outdoor. We had bowling alleys, we had gyms. I mean, there was even a teen club for the teens to go to, and they would have teen dances every weekend. And there was a McDonald's, and like we were a community unto ourselves. So to move onto Civvy Street into, to me, a big city like Barrie was, yeah, it was a little mind blowing. It was culture shock for sure.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
What's the one thing you can take away from this experience that you can just carry on to anybody that you speak to, if you're speaking to anybody about this experience?
That would have to be, wow, there's so many. Pinpointed to one thing, it would have to be my appreciation for the experiences I was able to have because my father was in the military. As much as he was away, and as hard as that was for just my mom with the kids and us missing our dad, and the experiences I got to have are not something that I would ever have had the opportunity to have had my dad not been in the military. Like telling you about the Abbey, and I mean, I learned to ski in Charmey, Switzerland. I've been to Amsterdam and gone to Anne Frank's attic hideout. Like I've been to Paris. Like there's just so many things that I never would have been able to do, and having had that opportunity, it's priceless.
So what I'm hearing is you've not only had the experience of just traveling, but you've been to some memorable places. Just hearing Anne Frank's attic, and you've been to, you've seen just the Louvre, and you've learned to ski in Switzerland. It's amazing. Like what would, and I guess the last question would be, would you do this all over again, given the opportunity?
Personally, no.
Okay.
I would not join the military. I like stability. And as thankful as I am, as I said, for those experiences, I like the stability of one place. And I've always said since I was about 17 or 18 that when I was a mother and had children, that I wanted my child to have the opportunity to go to school, start school with the same group of people, make those lifelong friends, and go all through school, public school, high school, with those friends and have that lifelong connection. So personally, no, I wouldn't. My father wanted me to, and I did not. So I wouldn't trade it, but I wouldn't do it myself.
Well, Sandra, I guess this comes to the end of our interview here. I want to thank you very, very much for participating in this interview and being an amazing participant. And I thank you. Mohawk College thanks you. And thank you. Have an amazing night.
Oh, my pleasure. Thank you so much.
Thank you very, very much. Okay.